Good morning. Good morning. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And this is a virtual coffee to go over some recent events in the district and to leave ample time for your questions and answers on any topic. So we begin with some of what you might already be aware of, which is questions people may have about how is the district responding to the war in Ukraine. So I wanted to begin with an overview of that and say that this war is especially personal for so many people in our district. We have 18 families that are in our district that either identify their home language as Russian or Ukrainian. So as soon as the war began, we are very fortunate on our staff to have one of our counselors who is fluent in Russian reach out personally to each of these families and to see what ways we could support them. And each of the schools has developed responses to provide our solidarity and support. So in Gillette's school, we will be collecting money for supplies to send to the Ukraine, and you can see details of that upcoming in the next few days. At Central School, the student government was very moved by the number of pets and animals that needed to be left behind, and they researched an agency that was working to provide safe transport of these animals and to get them to safety and out of the war zone. We also, through one of our parents, were able to connect with a Ukrainian church in Newark, and you'll see information about how specifically they are working to support the humanitarian efforts in the Ukraine, and that will be in this Friday's flyer. So separate and apart from the things that we'd like to do to come together to support the victims of this war and their families, we also want to be sure that our parents and teachers have information about how to address the barrage of information that our students may be hearing at home, maybe seeing on the news, maybe discussing with their friends. So on Friday, each of our principals sent home some resources, and there are articles that talk to you about how to approach difficult topics such as war with youngsters, some of the ways that you can begin those conversations, resources, tips for interpreting the news with them. And also, as is age appropriate, whenever situations like this come up, our teachers are trained. They watch for signs of students who may be upset. They know how to offer services to protect them and help them work through this. So I'm going to pause there, as that was the first item on our agenda. And if you have any questions about that general overview, or you have any suggestions or anything you'd like to add, you can put it in the chat or just call out a question or a comment.
I have a quick question around that. My daughter's in second grade. This is not being proactively discussed by the staff, and any of the help that's being provided. How is that being addressed with the kids? What I'm trying to avoid is a situation where, again, if the kids are talking about there's nothing we can do. I don't want to get backed into a corner, because it's being brought up proactively in some way that may be causing additional questions.
So in the younger grades, such as second grade that you mentioned, the focus hasn't been to have lessons or a proactive discussion on it. Whereas in middle school, when, for example, there's an assignment about current events or a history lesson, it might be more appropriate to have that proactive conversation. The fundraisers that I mentioned are up for board approval this weekend, and the communication would be at the younger grades directly to the family about it. Does that fully answer your question or no?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that topic? Okay, we have some proposed curricular revisions. It's a little unusual to have curricular revisions in the middle of the school year. Generally, we work on those curricular revisions in the summer, but we had two cases, different origins, that caused us to have to make some changes in the curriculum mid-year. So I want to review those with you. The first one was in the late fall, we had the opportunity to apply for a grant for the Foundation of Educational Administration for Youth Entrepreneurship. We were a successful recipient of that grant, and we have 7 teachers, myself and Ms. Jerry Colon, who is the Director of Special Services, as well as 3 parents who have received training in youth entrepreneurship. So this doesn't mean that we're sending all of the students out to start businesses, but rather we are looking at the qualities of youth entrepreneurship and what it can add to the curriculum. So for example, understanding a productive struggle. If you create something and you have a design and it doesn't work, how do you reshape those ideas? Understanding your audience, developing empathy. You can't really work to create things and solve problems until you understand other people. Looking at underserved markets. Where is there things out there in the world that could be better, that we could fix? So to offer you an example of that, when we went through the training, we had to identify problems that we see that might exist in our district or our community. And one of the first things that came up was drop off at our schools. So one of our teams was working on, okay, well, what could we do to increase and make the drop-offs more successful? And they were talking about the idea, what if we had a community-based app where we could have a sharing service where cars would take to particular neighborhoods? So I'm not saying we designed that, but it's this kind of thinking of promoting ideas and working together creatively. So some of the things show, some of the research in this shows, and that if you start attacking problems like this, empowering students to come up with solutions, that just opening up lessons in that way with creative problem solving will increase the students' engagement and result in greater performance in language arts and math, because students are working from a felt need of solving a problem and they have that real world connection. So there's 3 ways that we'll be implementing the youth entrepreneurship into our curriculum. One is we have a group of teachers who are working what we would kind of call mini lessons, or just 10 or 15-minute lessons that would be sort of like the do now activities that they have now, but focused on all of those ideas and tenets of youth entrepreneurship at grade appropriate levels. The second is that in May, during a 5-week period, we'll offer a free after-school class for students who want to learn more about designing their own products, about working in teams to solve problems. And then the third aspect of the curriculum will again be a free course offered to students to take during our Summer Institute, which is about the first 2.5 weeks in the summer. So I ask that you be out on the lookout for the sign up for the after school. You'll see communication from the teachers about how we're working on some of these mini lessons in the classroom. And then also you can sign up for the Summer Institute if you think it would be something of interest to your child. Everything is free because it is covered by the grant. So we begin by kind of dipping our feet in the water, if you will, with these 3 activities. And then for some of our upper elementary and middle school students, in the fall, if we get a good response, we would do what's called the Steam Tank Challenge. Which is where students have the ability to work with a trained teacher or parent, and cooperation with the individuals from Steam Tank Challenge to create their own tank, and then they bring them to an event where they have to work in a field to complete tasks. So maybe the tank has to pick up a certain number of balls, or it has to travel across a certain way in a timed format. So they learn all the parameters of this. They design their tank, which is controlled, like a robotic control, and they compete against one another. But engineers, designers, also individuals with military experience are all of the juried panel that provide the students feedback. So it's not just about competition and winning, which of course is always wonderful, but it's also about having your designs evaluated, about learning how to improve them, and about the iterations of the design process in different ways. So we're really excited to start the Youth Entrepreneurship Program in our district, and we look forward to beginning with these programs. And I can certainly share some websites with you. We're working with something called Venture Lab, which is one of the co-sponsors of this grant, and it is funded by the Foundation for Educational Administration. So I quickly summarized what the tenets of a Venture Lab curriculum look like, but I'm going to drop the website in the chat, and you can see a little bit more about the skills that we would like to work on. You can see some of the videos, and it's about developing that entrepreneurial mindset, about learning how to take calculated risks, understanding your audience. So it's a national organization that has been endorsed by a number of different educational organizations, but most of all, after attending the training myself, and we did a 2-day training, I think that it really focuses on developing those critical thinking skills, which translate well beyond engineering and mathematics, but into everything we need to do to make our students successful learners. Does anybody have any questions about Venture Lab or our partnership with FEA and the Youth Entrepreneurship Curriculum? Oh, I saw someone come off mute. Do they, any questions?
Do you happen to know, how many students will be able to participate?
Yeah, so our plan is since we're just starting, the after school program will be for 3rd and 4th graders. And in the first round of 5 weeks, we should be able to accommodate about 24. For the summer program, we're looking at multi-grade level. And again, we're thinking about 30. There's a number of classes, especially at Millington School, since that's where the majority of teachers have been trained, that will be doing those mini lessons. But we're going to gauge things as we go along. And if it seems like something that more students are interested in, then next year, when we launch it from fall to spring, we'll be able to accommodate more students.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that? The after-school program is for 3rd and 4th graders only at this point, because that's where we're starting with our pilot. The summer program would be open to more grades. The Steam Tank Challenge, if we go forward, would also be offered for middle school students. And when you take a look at the website, you'll be really surprised to see that even our youngest learners in 1st and 2nd grade are probably some of the best at thinking outside of the box and how do you solve these problems that face your community or face your school. So first focus after school, grades 3 and 4, summer multi-grades. In the fall, the Steam Tank Challenge would be open to middle school and Millington students as well. And we'll see aspects of the curriculum from kindergarten through 8th grade. You can also see, we tailored the curriculum to our students, but if you check out the website and look under resources, you can see some of the examples of the curriculum maps, and we'll be sharing the ones that we've developed here in Long Hill as well. Any other questions on youth entrepreneurship? Okay, the second aspect of the new curriculum will be in a letter that I'll be sending home tomorrow. New Jersey passed a law adopting Erin's Law, which was mandatory for New Jersey public schools to provide age-appropriate education to our students to prevent and understand the signs of abuse and neglect. Each year, all of our teachers and staff, everybody that works in our buildings receives training on how to handle situations like this. But we have written a curriculum in compliance with the law using the suggested resources that we're asking the Board of Education to approve. So the curriculum has not been delivered yet because it has to be subject to board approval, but I'd like to preview the letter and some of the resources that I'm going to share with you tomorrow pending board approval this evening to see if you have any questions, suggestions, or thoughts on it. Okay. I'm trying to just share this letter with you. Here it is, sorry. Can everybody see the letter okay? So this is the suggested letter, but Erin's Law was integrated to incorporate age-appropriate sexual abuse and sexual assault and awareness prevention for education of students at every grade. I want to be clear that the most important part of this curriculum isn't that it is explicit in any way, but it has some recurring themes. And most importantly, it talks about your personal safety, knowing who the trusted adults are in your life, and also how you can promote positive relationships, for example, in our middle school lessons. These lessons are about 15 minutes long, and they're going to be delivered as part of health and physical education. So for example, the kindergarten and first grade lesson is about being safe. Simply reading through a story that talks about being safe and defining what safe touches look like. And I think a really important part of the curriculum at the K1 and the 2-3 level especially is also talking about the harm, that there's no secrets that you should keep from your family. And talking about some of the common things that research has shown that allow people not to be safe, and how we can have these conversations with our children at home. Identifying the feelings that have sometimes been associated with abuse is a way to make sure that children can begin to trust their gut and understand how to keep themselves safe. As I mentioned, the important part of the curriculum is also understanding who safe people are in your life and how you can talk to them. The letter that you'll be receiving tomorrow will allow you to go through in detail the book presentation that will be given by the health and physical education teacher, but I'll share the one with the older grades, just so you can see the progression of the curriculum and understand what we mean when we say we're developing age-appropriate curricula. So it's the same concepts, but it also tells you a little bit about the history of the law and talks to middle school students about what's so important, which is relationships and that abuse can be male or female, that it can happen to anyone, and also thinking about making good choices for all types of relationships, your friendships, people who you listen to, the concept of trusting your gut. So while in the K-1 curriculum, we have to help students identify their feelings and know what it means to feel embarrassed or hurt. In middle school, we have to talk to students about, you have that internal alarm system. You know when you're getting that fight or flight reflex. And we talk to them about trusting your gut and understanding when something feels like it's not right, it's not. And that you have to be able to advocate for yourself at a time where adolescents often just want to go along with the crowd. Again, reinforcing the importance of good communication. A large part of the middle school curriculum is related in all areas to being safe online. Understanding that when you're playing a video game, if someone's asking you to take pictures, to send pictures, if they're texting you things that are inappropriate, that just because someone says that they go to Warren Middle School and they live near you, that you shouldn't just trust everything that people write online. I will say on a related topic that so much of the time that we spend at middle school is related to social media. And at times when students are out of sight, out of school, on their phone, playing with different games on a gaming system, using their computer or laptop, that's where so much of our issues related to bullying, bad choices in relationships come from. And we do a lot in the schools with that. And we're also looking to bring in a parent education piece, because I'm going to tell you that although we spend our lives doing this as educators, there's not a week that goes by that I don't find out about another app or another way that our middle schoolers are using social media that's new to me. So I think it's important that we talk about this as parents and understand what's out there and what our students are using. For example, a number of the middle school students now are on Discord, and Discord, when you look at it, there could be one room and it could be talking about kittens, and people could be just sharing pictures of cats and talking about a new cat that they got. But some of the other rooms, when you look at the title of them, where they go in with these anonymous names or screen names, just the title alone of what they're going in there to chat about should be a red flag. So a lot of what we talk to the students about is staying safe doesn't just mean staying safe when you're walking home from school. It means staying safe on your electronic devices. Advocacy, identifying, again, trusted adults is one of the most important parts of this curriculum. I will say that I have been incredibly impressed by the maturity of our central middle school students, and a number of the cases that we've dealt with cyberbullying and with harassment have come to us because students have embraced this message and feel comfortable speaking to the adults in the building when they see something going wrong, when they see a student targeted. So the board will receive this curriculum tonight, and they will have the opportunity to approve the curriculum. Should the board approve the curriculum this evening, you'll receive this letter that we have drafted, which will allow you to look in great detail at each of the curriculum, and the one that would be presented in a 15-minute lesson to your students as part of their health and physical education class. We understand and respect that these are sensitive topics and that some families may prefer to educate their children on this on their own at home. And while we believe that having the education in both places, having us support each other's message is a great way to make sure that the message is internalized, that we're using the same language, that we support one another, we also respect each family's decision. So as you'll note in the letter, if you have any questions about your child and this curriculum that we would be planning to deliver in April, you can certainly reach out to the principal and have any questions addressed, the guidance counselor have any questions addressed, and you can also let us know if you prefer to only have this education at home. So any questions on that addition to the curriculum on Aaron's Law? Again, you can put the questions in the chat or you can direct message them to me if you prefer. Okay, the final item that I have on the agenda for today is our updated COVID procedures. So I, again, will be sending these home in writing, but they're all subject to the approval of the Board of Education. So just to tell you where we are, and then I'll walk through the procedures. We have began our mask optional today in our schools. And one of the big concerns that we had when we went to a mask optional environment is that in our schools, we cannot maintain 6 feet of social distance. So when under the current provisions, if individuals are within 6 feet of one another and unmasked for a period of 15 minutes or more, they would be considered a close contact. And up to this point, we have been excluding close contacts from school to help curb the spread of the disease. So while that is a recommendation that schools still continue contact tracing, we convened our district safety team, which is all of our school nurses, all of our administrators and some teacher representatives, to review what we have in place and come up with what we're calling modified contact tracing. So the idea is that much like if you ever remember those dreaded letters that you sometimes get that say there has been a case of head lice in your child's classroom, and then you have to go home, put everything in those black bags and keep an eye on your child. If you find out that there's been a communicable disease in your child's homeroom, you get this letter that makes you aware. So that's the route that we're going to go down, and we're doing that for a number of reasons. A, we want to limit the number of students that we're excluding from school from close contacts, and that's largely because we have found that many of our close contacts do not end up developing COVID when they're on these quarantines. And when you're weighing the two things, which is excluding the children from school and then the potential risk of them developing COVID, it starts to go in the other direction. And you start to say, perhaps we're doing greater harm excluding these children when we're seeing that such a small number of those children have developed COVID. So I'm going to walk through briefly with you what I'll be providing in writing. Again, this may be amended or changed depending on the way the board either approves or approves as amended. We did reach out to the Department of Health. We shared this draft document with them to let them know that kind of for the first time, the district is deviating from the Department of Health guidelines. We had to consult also with our attorney and review what deviating from those guidelines looks like. So I'll walk through this with you. So as I said, we looked at the CDC guidelines, the Department of Health guidelines, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and all of them have slightly different, but general guidelines for managing COVID in K-12. You can always check our dashboard, and our dashboard will tell you up to the second. As soon as I put a case in, our website is updated, and I always knock on almost wood my desk here saying that we're doing very well. Our vaccination rates in our district continue to increase. You can see the percentages there. In the last 2 years, we looked carefully at COVID in our district, what the transmission level is, and how many school outbreaks we have. So these are going to be our procedures moving forward. Obviously, if someone tests positive and they're well enough to return to school after 5 days, they can wear a mask in school and return to school days 6 to 10. We are going to follow that for days 6 to 10 when they're in school and return after a positive case that they mask up. We will continue all of our mitigation efforts. Please stay home when you're sick. We will share any information with vaccination clinics with you. If you have any questions on those, on the front right-hand side of our webpage, you will see all of the upcoming vaccination clinics. You can also find them through the Bernards Department of Health. We're doing a great job with our air filters in each classroom. On a beautiful day like today, the children will be outside, the classroom windows are open. We do build in time into the school day several times a day for students to be able to take a break, to wash their hands. We have a cleaning regimen throughout each building each day, where the custodial crew go through the building, all the touch points and heavily trafficked areas at certain times. So they wipe all of our doorknobs, which are a touch point. We use the bioessence on our playground equipment and outdoor play equipment between each use. We minimize the extended periods of close contact among students. So while we might have a longer morning meeting or time on the rug, we tend to break that up, move the students around more, especially as they're moving into unmasked. We still generally have desks set up in rows as opposed to tables in most classrooms. And we're going to continue that at least for the next month or so as we move through this mask optional period before completely moving back to communal tables. So there's a lot more movement in the classroom. The teachers will take time. If you saw when you were in here as a visitor, perhaps for Read Across America, the students will be at their desks, but then they'll come together for a learning activity. I mentioned that youth entrepreneurship. Obviously, those are group activities, 10 or 15-minute lessons where students are working together using common materials. So we're just more mindful as we structure classes. We do, while we won't track vaccination records for all of our volunteers, we will screen all visitors. It's that same form that you typically fill out when you might go into a doctor's office or into certain businesses, a quick temperature check, and then just let us know if you have any COVID-related symptoms. And we're going to now follow this modified contact tracing, which is we will communicate positive COVID cases through a student's cohort at Central. In other words, if it's in a student's class, you at Gillette or Millington, you'll get a note. If it's in a student's cohort, in other words, the students travel together in different groups, and we would take a look at we've developed schedules at Central that say, okay, this would be a group or a grade level where it would be important that these students know if one in their group develops COVID. In those cases, the students would not be excluded from school. We would just ask that you monitor the your child for any COVID-like symptoms. And if you do see them, report them to the nurse. We're not requiring any asymptomatic in-school close contacts to quarantine. If an individual is exposed to COVID outside of school and remains asymptomatic, so they get it at Girl Scouts or a ball game or at a family function, still not expecting that they quarantine. Right now, because we're using the modified contact tracing model, our test to stay for students is on hold. If something changes, as of course we've all learned from this pandemic that things could change and we need to implement the test to stay, we will. I want to thank the 170 people who opted their children into it, because if we needed to quickly go to a test to stay, for example, if numbers went up, we have those individuals registered with Longview Testing Agency, and we would be ready to roll that out on a day or two's notice. If you're asymptomatic and you experience COVID exposure in your household, that's where things are a little different. So while we did find that exposure within the school, in-school transmission was low, the numbers in our district and also in the cases that have been charted throughout the state through household contact are greater. So if you're living in a situation where you cannot separate, it is much more likely that that individual will develop COVID based on what we've seen. So if the exposure is a household contact and the individual is vaccinated or tested positive for COVID in the last 90 days, we're going to ask that they mask and monitor for symptoms, and they can elect to test if they wish. If you're unvaccinated and you have a COVID exposure, it would be that 5-day rule and then returning to school day 6 to 10 masked. So if it's a household contact, the provisions are a little different, and there are some masking and quarantine for unvaccinated there. And again, this is based on the fact that we have seen different transmission rates for in-school as opposed to household contacts. For siblings, they should be excluded from school until the symptomatic individual receives a negative test, unless you're vaccinated or you've had COVID in the last 90 days. We encourage you to follow the travel recommendations, as they are just recommendations at this point. In cases where you wish to test and you have to provide those testing results to the district, we'll accept rapid antigen tests, PCR tests, and also home tests. So all of those are acceptable. And there may be changes in the future. We hope that this is just a continuation of pulling everything back. But if we do need to hopefully go back to something that's a little bit more strict, we would let you know well in advance. But we're hopeful that it just keeps moving in this direction and everybody keeps staying healthy. So any questions on the updated COVID procedures?
So did you say this is going to be addressed at the board meeting tonight?
Yeah, so I've shared this with the board in advance, and basically the advice that we were given from the attorney is, because we are deviating from Department of Health guidelines and recommendations, that we have to explain our rationale publicly and publicly affirm why we're kind of doing this. And we're doing it because of all the reasons I said: lower cases, consulting with the Department of Health. So in the past, where it was just kind of, here's the directives and follow them, because we're changing our action and doing something different than the Department of Health, it does get discussed at the board level.
Okay, yeah, and I'm partially asking because I didn't see it on the agenda when that was sent out.
Oh, that's a good point. You know, we should have added that to a discussion item. So I'll be doing the overview in the superintendent update, and you make a really good point. I should have put that on the agenda, perhaps listed it under new business. So thank you for pointing that out. I should have done that.
And then, so this is a discussion item, or does it need board approval?
Yeah, so it's not a formal motion, which is, I guess, why I miss putting it on the agenda. So they won't say, motion to accept the revised things, but there needs to be a public conversation about it so that we can point to the minutes and say the board was aware, we had conversations, and we agreed to follow, for example, modified contact tracing. But it's not a formal board motion.
Okay.
But it should have been it under like new business just for transparency. So when people are looking at the agenda and seeing, items that are discussed, they know. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, no, and again, just I wanted to be clear how it was going to be handled at the board meeting, if it was going to be a vote or, like you said, just discuss.
Yeah, discussion as opposed to a vote.
I'll just say publicly, thank you for being proactive and looking at things a little differently in this scenario.
Yeah, I'm excited, and the nurses are excited too. And I would say, our nurses are a great barometer. They have kept everybody safe. They participated in this process, and we worked through it together. So I'm hopeful that everything goes very well. Okay, certainly if you have any other questions about COVID or these procedures, you can ask them, but open the floor to any types of questions that you might have at all on any topic. Yes.
Just because you brought the drop-off situation for the schools, can I ask you, have you thought about like doing at Millington, instead of like drop by grades, drop by alphabetically by families?
Oh, I can ask
Like,
that question. The one thing we're excited about is, we're repaving everything at Millington. So when we go through the process of repaving, we're actually going to push out the front parking lot to give more access to pass through. So we're moving the parking spaces forward onto that grassy area so that the area in front of the school now will be easier for cars to pass through when there's buses there. So I'll pass that along to Mrs. Dawson about the alphabetical, and we may also be able to be more creative when we get that additional space in the front of the building with what we can do with drop off.
yeah, I feel with alphabetically, you avoid like a car stopping twice
Right,
if you have different kids' ages.
that's true. True. I'll talk to Mrs. Dawson about that.
On the same idea with that, is there a reason why the morning drop off, they don't go around the building in the same way they do pickup in the afternoon?
I don't know, so I'll ask.
I mean,
that.
in the morning, there's no children playing.
Right.
In the afternoon, you actually might interact with the aftercare.
Right, that's a fair point. I'll bring both of those up to Mrs. Dawson. Any questions on any topic at all?
When will the lunchroom groupings change? They're sitting in pods or groups?
They are.
Yeah.
So our plan is to give everything with these new procedures about 3 weeks or so, and to look at April, see how we do for the next 3 weeks. So you can anticipate some of those changes starting the first and second week in April. Questions or comments on any other topic? Well, I thank everyone very much for joining, and please remember that you can always feel free to reach out to me via phone or email, and you'll receive follow-up emails on the topics that we discussed today, tomorrow. on both the updated procedures and the new curriculum. And if you have any questions when you read those in more detail, never hesitate to reach out. And I hope everybody enjoys the beautiful weather and has a great Monday. Thank you so much. Take care.
One last thing.
Yes.
Will there be any changes